Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for inviting me to speak. My name is Tom Su, and I am the Executive Director of IAHR, the International Association for Hydro, Environment, Engineering and Research. Let me start by introducing IAHR and the concept of hydro environment. IAHR is a worldwide independent, member-based association that was established 85 years ago by major hydraulic research institutes around the world at a time when it was becoming recognized that in order to maintain national development, the world needed to act in a global manner to address hydraulic issues. Since then, development paradigms have come a long way, and the water challenges have evolved and become ever more pressing and complex. So just under 10 years ago, IHR formally included into its name the words hydro environment. And this was done to recognize the decades of engineering and research communities evolving and adapting to the many water complexities and challenges that are existing today. So what do we mean by hydro environment? And what does it mean for helping arid and semi-arid areas to adapt to water stress? Hydro environment engineering and research is about expanding our knowledge about water flow and management in engineered structures and natural water bodies, and the use and application of that knowledge to serve the needs of people and in harmony with the environment. Today, IHR brings together around 4,000 members from all over the world with regional divisions in Europe, Latin America, Asia Pacific, Africa, and also in MENA. We bring together some 30 or so technical committees and working groups. IHR's vision is to bring together the world's engineers, the world's experts, researchers, and organizations to accelerate solutions and knowledge discovery about the water environment. I'd like to congratulate the organizers of the event today, the International Conference on Water Resources in Arid Environments, as this is an important activity where IAHR can contribute to help us to collectively understand and improve our ability to apply hydro environment knowledge to address water security in arid countries. I'd like to kick off this part of my presentation by talking about some of the complex set of factors that leads to water stress and how that particularly impacts arid environments and countries in these arid zones. The first set of factors that I'd like to talk about is the population change. And on my left here, on this side, is an infographic of the world population, which is expecting to see a significant and massive increase in the population. Indeed, we can see the population of 5.3 billion in 1990, expecting to more than double by the time we are in 2100, where the projections are around 11.2 billion. And already today, we are over 7 billion. Now, the rise in population is not the only demographic factor that is going to be affecting our management of water resources. Indeed, with the rise in population, we are also expecting a rise in wealth amongst that population. So a rising middle class and a larger middle class will expect and will demand more goods and services that use water, and thus create a demand, an added demand on our water resources. An additional factor in terms of demographic change is also the shift in our in where the population lives. So the urbanization of our growing populations and the rapid urbanization will also lead to major shifts in the way we need to manage our water resources. Now, all of this is at the global level. On the right-hand side of my presentation, there's a graph produced by UNICEF that focuses on an arid region. So here it's a picture of the MENA region, and we can see here that it follows a similar pattern. most of the countries, in fact, all of the countries except Lebanon, are expected to see significant increase in population. In the orange dots that you see on the top, the population growth that is expected by 2050, and the benchmark in the blue underneath are the populations as at 2015. So the UNICEF report also identifies that much of that population growth is in these arid regions are going to happen in the countries which are least equipped, so the least resilient and with the least amount of economic resources to improve capacity to adapt to these changes and to the shocks of demographic shift. The second set of complex factors that I'd like to mention, of course, are the physical factors, precipitation, hydrology, and water stress. So on the left-hand side of this slide, we have a graph, or so not a graph, sorry, a map produced by the World Resources Institute that indicates water stress by country, the projections for 2040, some 20 years from now. And on the right is a map of the aridity index, so indicating those regions of the world which are experiencing arid environments, and they being the kind of the yellow and orangey colored parts of the map. What we'll see is quite a good correlation between the physically arid areas of the world and those areas which are projected to experience high or extremely high water stress. Now, having said that, there is a difference between the two. You'll see that because a zone is not considered to be arid, such as Southeast Asia or some parts of Eastern Asia, they are also projected to be experiencing high water stress or extremely high water stress by 2040, and that's because these countries will be are expected to be using and extracting more water resources than are physically available in those areas. So in the end, arid countries and water-stressed countries will face, if not the same, similar sets of circumstances where we could learn from each other for solutions in the future. Now, this is the last slide that I'd like to use to set the scene on the complex set of factors that lead to our requirement for better hydro environment contributions to water stress. On the left is some projections by the IPCC on climate change. It's quite commonly known, I suppose, now amongst the experts that there is an expected temperature increase, expected changes in precipitation reliability, especially in arid countries such as the MENA region. There is an expected increase in frequency of extreme events such as floods, such as drought, and there is an expected decrease in the reliability of precipitation. All of these factors that I mentioned, climate change, precipitation, water stress, demography, will lead to an increasing competition between water uses in the future. And on the right-hand graph here, as a projection by the OECD of the changes that we are expecting in the amount of water use, proportional water use per sector, which of course means we must have a different way of approaching how we manage our water resources. If you look at, for example, agriculture, which is often cited for many years now as the major user of our available water resources, if you look at these projections, it will no longer be the 70% that we like to quote, but by 2050, it will be a much smaller amount. Correspondingly, areas and sectors such as manufacturing or energy production and even domestic use will increase the proportionate use of our water resources. And all of this requires a unique and targeted way of addressing the water problems that we'll be facing in the decades to come. So how do we go about doing this? This obliges us to approach the issues and challenges by adopting a system-wide approach, and one that is not limited by silo thinking. And what do I mean by silo thinking? I mean that we're not looking at trying to manage our water resources from a city's perspective only, or from an irrigation perspective only. This system-wide thinking requires us to be able to span disciplines, span sectors, and span borders, both in a hydric sense, but also in an administrative sense, to be able to identify and implement the right solutions. Now, this is where hydro environment engineering and research approach really comes to the fore. IAHR has some 30 technical committees and working groups working on different topics. They range from traditional fluvial hydraulics to hydraulic structures to eco-hydraulics to hydroinformatics, AI, data, to climate change and nature-based solutions. All of this is going to require this multidisciplinary approach to the solutions. Now, this expertise really comes to the fore when we amplify their impact with existing major global frameworks such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals. IAHR recently published a white paper in collaboration with 12 other international organizations on the roles of engineers to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals on water, so SDG 6. These goals cover a range of development topics that you can see in the diagram on my right. And the paper outlines how engineers can play a role in achieving each and every single one of these targets. It requires a multidisciplinary approach. So it requires approaches and perspectives from civil engineering to hydraulic engineering to the software and artificial and data experts to hydrology or fluid dynamics and energy systems and various other areas. I won't go into how they specifically contribute to every single one of these targets, but I would like to maybe highlight one or two of the targets and how hydro environment engineering and research can contribute to them. So take, for example, target 6.2. This target is all about reducing water pollution and halving the proportion of untreated wastewater. So basically reducing untreated wastewater discharge from around 2,200 billion cubic meters per year to 1,100 by 2030. This will undoubtedly require the involvement of engineers at all the aspects of that problem solution design chain, such as the design, construction, or modernization of appropriately scaled wastewater treatment plants, or sustainable urban drainage schemes, or sewage systems design. If I look at another one of the SDG targets, 6.4 on water efficiency, this requires innovative engineering-led design to develop innovations, for example, to identify and eliminate leaks, smart water metering, to track inefficient usage, and water storage approaches, such as rainwater harvesting. Specific sectors where engineering can really contribute to improving water use efficiency include in irrigation, in municipal distribution networks, as well as in industrial and energy cooling processes by reducing losses. In cities and other areas, engineering contributes via solutions, for example, in sustainable drainage systems, or encouraging natural recharge of aquifers, and implementing nature-based solutions in rivers. Now, overall, the implementation of many of these approaches and systems can benefit by increasing use of artificial intelligence, which can help to optimize operations and give tools and options to decision makers and managers in ways that we could never imagine before. In the coming slides, I'll try to illustrate with a few concrete examples of the work of the IAHR members to contribute to water management solutions via these kinds of sectors and multidisciplinary approaches in arid countries. So the first example is irrigation, where hydro environment engineering research has a large role to play, especially in these arid areas where water stress is so important in terms of its impact on socioeconomic as well as environmental well-being. On my left here is a photo of the main canal on the right bank of the Ebro Delta in Tarragona in Spain. And on the right is a photo of the reclaimed irrigated lands in the Beira region in Egypt. Water for irrigation in this area, we can identify several main concerns. Consumption is a first concern, as irrigation uses, at the moment, a large proportion of the water withdrawals of the world, around 70%. Waterlogging of irrigated lands, which are lacking in drainage, is a second problem, which in arid and semi-arid areas is associated to soil salinity. About 11% of the present irrigated lands around the world are affected by salinity due to inefficient irrigation and drainage management. Now that means that around 34 million hectares of lands equipped with irrigation schemes don't achieve the potential benefit associated with irrigation. Our third problem is related to the impacts of irrigation return flows on the quality of water bodies associated to the irrigation schemes. So this would be through the disposal of surface water to rivers and to lakes, and by deep percolation towards aquifers. And the quality of the water can be deteriorated by salts and microelements, fertilizers mobilized from the soil. Amongst these problems that I just mentioned is the very basic challenge to increase the world's capacity to produce more food for less water. Now, to address this, we must mobilize engineering and research to bring a variety of practical solutions, knowledge, and innovation via, for example, our ability to increase irrigation capacities around the world. This would be by designing networks or mobilizing resources, including non-conventional resources, or via solutions in irrigation modernization. So this would mean things such as improving conveyance, decreasing leakages, improving on-time and accurate delivery of irrigation. I'd like to move now to a second example, which is desalination. Now, with more than half of the world's population living close to the ocean and having around 70% of the world's megacities on coasts, desalination and water reuse is perhaps one of the most obvious examples of where hydro environment engineering and research is of particular value to arid and water-stressed countries. The increasing competitiveness of desalination can be related to considerable improvements in hydraulics, such as through energy recovery devices or outfall systems, or membrane optimization, or through intake systems, such as the one in the photo on the left, which is in Barcelona, and often where intake systems where engineering meets disciplines such as eco-hydraulics, as fish protection is highly important. As mentioned before, a system-wide approach is essential for coherent solutions for arid countries. We all know that, for example, desalination is an energy-intensive method for mobilizing fresh water. So we need to couple that with the energy sector, the water sector and the energy sector. The high energy demands for desalination processes are also pushing research, engineering and innovation in hydraulics, such as providing pressure for membranes from renewable hydraulic energies, such as waves or tides or currents. And the coupling between the energy systems, the treatment systems, and the hydro-environmental systems would definitely be required moving into the future. The picture on the right shows the global desalination capacity, which is converging also with water purification technologies and reuse. Now, the last example I'd like to highlight is on groundwater. And I'd like to highlight the role of hydro-environment engineering and research on groundwater management in arid areas. This example involves the story of the Eastern Mancha aquifer system, which is in Spain, and which is shown in the picture on the left. And the story starts, well, I'll start the story in the middle of the 1960s, when the importance of this aquifer was discovered. And of course, being in an arid area, this was shortly followed by a big surge in well drilling by individuals and increasing irrigated lands. A lack of oversight, management oversight, meant over-instruction, and when combined with droughts in the early 1990s, a big drop in the piezometric levels and water flow from the aquifer to the Yucca River system was seen. The Yucca River was kind of fed by this aquifer. So much so that the Yucca River actually went dry for the first time on record. A number of actions were put into place to remedy this situation. This was included harmonizing water rights with extractions, improving efficiency in some of the irrigation systems, improving surface water, importing air surface water from outside the system, and replacing some of the groundwater supplies for cities with other sources and buying rights. These measures have somewhat stabilized the resource, as you can see in the diagram on the right. On the tail end of these graphs, that you'll see that there's a stabilization of the system. And one contribution and example of how hydraulic engineering community was able to contribute is by providing the numerical models using ModFlow and Model Muse, a graphical interface, to provide information to decision makers to better manage these scarce resources. So the Eastern Mancha aquifer system is a clear example in which the combination of working with all stakeholders in a system-wide manner with the aid of data and decision-making and aid tools can end in good outcomes. On this, my almost last slide, I wanted to recognize the role of innovation and bringing knowledge to reality. As the challenges rise, so have our innovations. This graph on the left, produced again by the OECD, shows the relative rise in patented inventions related to water and climate change since the 1990s. And you can see there's been a rapid acceleration from the 1990s and into the 2000s. It's tailed off a bit now, but overall, the trend has been quite on the rising side. And the innovation and technology, I would like to say, has a vital role to play in scarcity, safety and water efficiency of utility operations, in monitoring, in treatment, and data and analytics. Now, global entrepreneurs and research institutes are witnessing a greater willingness by utilities and businesses to test and adopt promising technologies. This includes the remote sensing of water, which can help with water accounting, non-revenue water remediation, and much, much more. The Internet of Things, which enables smart irrigation, water quality control, and when coupled with new computing capacity, allows us to develop complex models for water management that will help us to manage water resources, especially in arid countries. Now, working with researchers and companies that offer the latest technical innovations in the sector will, of course, help us to advance such efforts. IAHR's members consist of the major labs of the world, the major institutions, as well as industry and research, and they too have been at work innovating. I put here on the right side a mention of the HydroLink magazine that IAHR produces, where much of these innovations are showcased. And indeed, I make a special mention of HydroLink because I used it to highlight some of the examples I gave just previously on groundwater, on irrigation, and on desalination. I'd like to end my presentation with a recognition to those who work hard and have been able to show outstanding innovations and knowledge in the hydro-environment sector. And I would like to give a special mention to the PSIPW, with whom IAHR has partnered for many, many years to recognize the world's best experts. The PSIPW is the Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz International Prize for Water. I would also like to take this opportunity to announce that from the 5th to the 7th of July this year, IAHR will be holding its first ever online forum, and then we will be following up next year with the 39th IAHR World Congress, which will bring together many experts to work on hydro-environmental engineering research in Granada in Spain, so another arid area. I'd like to invite everybody to participate in these upcoming events, and I very much look forward to being able to bring forward the outcomes and the relationships that are created at this particular event and we can work together into the future. On that particular note, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude my presentation today, and I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you.